Hello everybody, it's Flesson19 and welcome to my guide to the best towns to own for each culture in the game. Instead of doing one town, I decided to expand it to the two best towns. That way, hopefully, what you're looking for, you're going to be able to find. I know a lot of this information is going to be subjective and some of it is going to be objective. Be a little bit forgiving when I do give this list, as it's just my opinion. It's just what I personally think. I want to bring you that information, and hopefully it will be good for you. What's going to be contained in this list is going to be prosperity, the location, how safe or how dangerous it's going to be, the bound villages to the town, and also the bound villages to the castles around it. Now, those are going to be a warning to you, because if it is owned by another culture and you're at war, it will not bring it to your town. Also, a lot of people do not realize that if the prices in another town are super high, that is close by, and yours are very low, those castle-bound villages, they could decide to take it to another town. I will timestamp this by culture, so that way you can skip ahead to exactly the culture that you want to see. Without further ado, here are the list of the best towns to own for each culture/kingdom. The second best for the Aserai is going to be Asgard. They start out with only 2,100 prosperity. Their location, though, is probably the best in the game as far as being safe from other people. It does have 3 bound villages producing horses, grain, and a second grain. So you have double grain off of it. It has 3 castle-bound villages, 2 of them with horses and 1 with dates. It's going to have plenty of food, okay prosperity, very, very safe, and it's going to have a ton of food for you. The best one will be Sanala. It starts out at a whopping 4,300 prosperity, and it rises very quickly. It is still very safe, as it takes a long time for anybody to get down here. It has 4 bound villages with 3 producing grain and 1 producing fish. It is a food producing machine. It only has 2 castle bound villages, 1 with dates, and the other one, though, has silver. Sanala, to me, is the best Aserai town you could own. Coming in at number 2 is Dunglanis. It does have 4,000 starting prosperity. The location is okay. It's in the heart of Battanian territory. It does have 3 bound villages to it. 1 with grain, 1 with wood, 1 with grapes. It also has 3 castle-bound villages. 1 with grain, 1 with grapes, and 1 with silk. If you can keep the castles with you, you're going to have double grain and double grapes supplying it. So all in all, not a bad place to start. The best for me is going to be Marinath. The starting prosperity is a whopping 5,000. The location is a little bit iffy, as you are somewhat close to Vlandia and to the Western Empire. It does have 4 bound villages with grain, grapes, clay, and iron. It, however, only has 1 castle-bound village, which gives it pigs. So to me, Marinath, this is only by a hair compared to Dunglanis and Penkanak, is the best one to own for Battania. The second best for the Khuzait I pick is Chalkin. Starts out at 3,900 prosperity, which is not bad. The location isn't super terrible. They do have to go way around the water to get to you. It has 3 bound villages producing double grain and sheep. So you can have a wool weavery. Does have a lot of food production. It also does have 2 castle-bound villages producing clay and sheep once again. So Chalkland is a very good town to start with food, prosperity, and of course, wool weaveries. For me, number 1 is Balticon. Where this is going to suffer is it only starts out with 1800 prosperity. And the location is not great. You are super close to Sturgia and the Northern Empire. But where Balticon comes in is the amount of massive villages that are connected to it. Firstly, it has 3 bound villages producing sheep, flax, and horses. Where it really hits its mark has 6 castle-bound villages, I believe the most in the game. It produces triple sheep, horses, grain, and cows. While it's not going to produce much food, if you can hold those castles, you are going to be able to have grain, you're going to have the cattle, and you are going to have 4 villages supplying it with sheep. Therefore, you could run 3 wool weaveries in Balticon, and it should have no problem continuing to run if you can hold it. So that's why there is a good point and a bad point to it. It has 10 villages bringing stuff, which that is going to skyrocket the prosperity with how many goods it's going to have. The only question is, can you hold it? Sturgia is a very weird one, so I'm going to take you on 2 of them at both opposite ends of the spectrum. First, I'm going to go with Revolve. It starts out with 3100 prosperity. The location it is in is amazing. There is only one way in or out. As long as you maintain that corridor past Verchag, there is no one that can get to you. It only does have 2 bound villages. However, one is grain, one is fish, the 2 best food producing in the game. It does only have 2 castle bound villages, one with cattle and one with horses. So you're going to get food out of it, but it only has 4 villages. The castle just to the south across the water is not connected to Revolve. Those goods actually go to Varchak. You're not going to get a whole lot from the villages itself, but what you're going to get is you're going to get very good materials from them, good food, but it's very, very safe location if you want your first city. For me, number 1 is Tayel. Now, this is on the opposite end of the spectrum as the last one. It only starts out with 1700 prosperity. It has a terrible starting location. You are right on the front line with the Khuzait and the Northern Empire. So holding it is going to be a challenge. Where it's going to come in and it's going to be very good for you is going to be the villages that it has. Now, it only has 2 villages bound to the town, one producing sheep, one producing cows. But if you're able to hold the castles, there are 4 villages that are bound to the castles around it. You will end up getting grain, fish, cows, and fur. And there are some people that do like to go to war. And there's only one way in to get to Tayel. So it can be kind of a trap if you want to go ahead and trap an army there. While it has its downside with the location and with the prosperity, the stuff that it brings in is great. And by also bringing in sheep, you can do wool weaveries. So it has its good points and its bad points to it. But I think the good definitely far outweighs the bad when it comes to the terrible Sturgeon towns. For Vlandia, the second one was really a toss-up between Gallon and Jocelyn. However, I did give the edge to Galland. While it only starts out at 1900 prosperity, the location is amazing. It is so far away from everybody that it is going to be tough for people to come after you. I can only see maybe Western Empire and Battania even making an attempt to get close to you. It has 3 bound villages. producing great fish and sheep. However, it only has one castle-bound village, but it does produce olives. Every single village is going to bring you something that could go ahead and give you a consumable. I think Gallon is just a tiny bit ahead of Jocelyn, especially because of its location. The best by far is Praven. It starts out with 3,200 prosperity. The location is really good. You might have to put up with Battania for the most part. It has 3 bound villages producing hogs, grain, and grapes. It also has 3 castle bound villages producing horses, fish, and grain. So when you add all 3 of them up, you get double grain, fish, grapes, and hogs, all producing food. So you have great prosperity, good bound villages, good castle bound villages, a ton of food. Hands down, I will take Praven any day of the week in Vlandia. The Western Empire, second for me, is going to be Rateau. It starts out at a great 4,900 prosperity. The location is not the best, as you are kind of close to Battania and you're close to the Northern Empire. It does have 3 bound villages with double grain and cattle producing a ton of food. It does have 2 bound villages. However, those are further to the north, in which they're going to be bringing you iron and silver. So those are going to have to fight through the bandits. But with the location that is in and what is being produced, 3 bound villages, double grain, and cattle, I think that's what takes the cake in making Rateau so good. Number 1 for me is definitely going to be Zionica. It starts out with 4,500 prosperity. Now, the location is, I'm going to say, not great. While you only are going to have to normally put up with the Southern Empire, the Southern Empire is going to try to go after the castle-bound villages and the castle quite frequently, and you have multiple ways that the Southern Empire can actually get here. Where Zionica really comes into play is what it produces. It has 3 bound villages producing double grain and horses. It also has 2 castle-bound villages producing double grapes. So you're going to get double grapes and double grain. There's a lot of food there, has a great prosperity. As long as you can hold off the Southern Empire, Zionica is by far the best in the Western Empire. Second best for the Northern Empire for me is Argeron. It starts out with an okay 2,800 prosperity. The location is decent, but it's farther enough away that you shouldn't get bothered too much. Where it's going to get bothered is by their bound villages. That's where I think you could get raided. And it only has 2 bound villages, one with fish, one with wood. Where it comes into its own is the castle bound villages bringing it. It has fish, cattle, flax, and horses. You're going to get cattle and double fish. And fish is the second best when it comes to feeding a town. So I will just barely give the nod in the second best to Argeron. Number 1 for me, hands down, is going to be Epicrodia. And it starts out with an amazing 5,100 prosperity. The location, however, is absolutely terrible. You are right next to Sturgia, Battania, and the Western Empire. While that is an issue, where it comes into its own is all the villages. You get 3 bound villages with iron, grain, and fish. And you also get 4 castle bound villages with wood, iron, cattle, and grain. While the location is terrible and projecting all of your bound villages is going to be a nightmare, if you can do that, you could have one of the strongest towns in the game with what can be produced there. Second best for me is going to be Donostica. It has over 4,000 prosperity. The location, though, is not good at all. You're going to be on the front lines of both the Khuzait and the Aserai, which are the two most feared when it comes to horses. It does have 3 bound villages with salt, sheep, and clay. That's not very good when it comes to food. If you can hold the castle bound villages, you're going to get double grain and sheep. Altogether, you're going to get 2 grain and 2 sheep out of it. That is going to be a lot of food. And as everybody knows, wool weaveries being the best, you could run 2 or 3 wool weaveries in your town and make a lot of money. It does have its negatives, but as with the Southern Empire, virtually everyone does. And for me, number one, which could shock a lot of people, is going to be Volstrom. It has a whopping 5,100 prosperity. You're going to be somewhat close to the Western Empire, and you're going to be close to the Khuzait and the Aserai. It does have 3 bound villages to it, producing double grain and salt. It also has 2 castle villages, which produce salt and fish. By holding those together, you are going to end up getting double grain and fish. That is why I think Volstrom takes the nod when it comes to prosperity, location, and having double grain and fish. I would definitely take Volstrom as my number one in the Southern Empire. So that is my personal favorite 2 from each kingdom / culture. I know it's going to vary differently between everybody, and I tried to mix it up a little bit, making some better producers, but a little bit more for war and some that are a little bit more safe, because everybody's play style is different. So I hope this helped you out to figure out maybe what you want to look for when you're taking your first town. Until next time, my friends, take care, and thanks for watching.